Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Vox Vomitus. I am your host, author Jennifer Ann Gordon, author of Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, as well as the Hotel series. I am joined once again, as always, by my two Vox Vomitus vixens, Trisha Mckee, author of the Beyond series, and Allison Martine, author of the Bourbon books. Hi. We are joined today by our esteemed guest, David Burr Gerrard, author of The Epiphany Machine, as well as A Million Short Stories. I think is that the direction?
It's I'm trying to push it up to 1 billion.
Oh, like McDonald's.
Exactly. I think
Don't compare it to McDonald's, please.
I figure 1 million short stories isn't cool. 1 billion short stories is cool.
That is very cool. So, David, tell us and tell our guests a little bit about yourself.
So first of all, thank you very much for having me. This is great, and it's a real honor to be here. About myself, I've written these two books and these 1 billion short stories. I teach creative writing at the New School in the 92nd Street Y, and other than that, as I was telling you guys before we went live. I spend a lot of time now in the pandemic taking care of my kid. I have a beautiful 2.5-year-old daughter, and we wind up playing a lot and watching Frozen and Coco, and that's pretty much my life right now.
How many times have you seen Frozen?
I haven't counted and wouldn't count. It's definitely 1,000,000,001. I've definitely
more than your short stories.
Exactly. I've definitely seen Frozen more times than I've published short stories.
Have you seen the sequel? Have you seen Frozen 2: Electric Boogaloo?
Yes. I don't want to offend anyone at Disney in case they're watching, but I'm not a fan of Frozen 2.
No, that's fair, because I saw it in theaters and I'm sitting there going, how did I draw the short straw that my husband gets to go see Star Wars with our oldest, and I'm sitting here watching, what is this? Did they even pull new songs or just pull them out and go, if Kristen Bell sings it, it'll be okay.
Yeah,
we'll make money.
So, David, your book, the Epiphany Machine, is such a cool concept. So can you elevator pitch that, or do you want me to just say it's about a sewing machine that gives you tattoos? That's the epiphany of your life.
I mean, you pretty much did.
Is that right?
That's pretty much what the book's about. Yeah.
I love it. Do you have tattoos?
Question. That's a good question, and I intended throughout the process of writing the book to get tattoos, because I thought, now I have to get a tattoo. But part of what drove me to write the book in the first place is that I'm afraid of both needles and permanence, and
forget
it. And I could just never exactly actually put myself under the needle. And now the book's out. The book came out a while ago, so I think I'm tattoo free now.
You've dodged that publicity bullet, right?
Exactly.
I know.
Exactly.
Do I have to write a Epiphany Machine here?
My publicist did ask me a number of times to get a tattoo, and it might have helped me sell, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 copies, but
I was going to say you could have sold tens of books like that.
Exactly.
There's a niche there, right there.
Yeah, precisely.
It could be a book signing / tattoo party back when you were a kid.
That sounds awesome. Signing books, sign people.
There you go. I did have people tag me on Instagram with not like permanent tattoos, but they got like temporary tattoos of either things that were in the book or things that were occurring to them, and that was very cool.
So, have you had anybody get a permanent tattoo that was based on your book?
No. If I got that, I'd be very happy. I'm afraid of tattoos, but I have all the respect in the world for people who get them. So, if anybody out there watching now wants to get a tattoo, feel free to get in contact with me. I'll be your friend for life.
Oh gosh, I mean, I've been looking to get another tattoo.
Well, there you go.
You have enough, Jen.
I try to get a tattoo every time I finish a book, but we've been in pandemic, so I haven't gotten a tattoo in a while.
Right.
And I'm also running out of space on my body.
Yeah. That's something that happens. Yeah.
Like running out of good real estate that won't sag.
Right.
You're gonna start looking like a belter from the Expanse series and work on here, and then like the face tattoos. It's a look.
I don't want to do a face tattoo. I feel like it's too Mike Tyson.
It's very prison tattoo, but if you're a true sci-fi diehard, you can start saying,
"Come on,
this is Belter." You know, you just get it.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because when I was first writing the book, one of the first questions I had is, okay, where's the tattoo going to go? And I thought the face, but then it just seemed like
that's too much body horror.
Exactly. Yeah, precisely. We were talking about David Lynch before. I like David Lynch. I like David Cronenberg. Major influences on me, but
all the weird Davids. Do you like David Byrne too?
I was like, I'm a weird David. I gotta like the weird David.
It's your people.
Exactly.
My people. My tribe.
Yeah, exactly.
So, the concept of getting a tattoo that is like an epiphany about who you are, like as your core being, to me sounds terrifying and beautiful. And I know your book is listed as science fiction or, literary science fiction. We always fight within ourselves about what our categories are. Like, what am I writing? What is this?
Yeah.
I feel like yours also could be literary horror.
I like that
as a concept.
I mean, to be honest, I've never been that interested in genre distinctions. I'm always like, I just want to read good books. Probably the biggest influence on this book was Kafka's In the Penal Colony. In that short story, there's a torture device that essentially tattoos the crimes of prisoners on their back and writes it over and over again until they die. And that's certainly a kind of, if you're going to classify that, I don't know if you call it speculative horror or just horror or whatever, or just Kafka.
Kafka. The category is Kafka.
Yeah, the category is Kafka. And that's how I feel about my work too. I love to take influences from everywhere. There's no genre that I'll say like, I'm above that genre or what have you. I just want something that's lively, that's going to be interesting to me, that's going to scare me. And I use scare broadly, not just in horror, although certainly horror is great. But that's what I'm interested in. So yeah. It's, my book is called science fiction by the publisher. But that's just what they call it.
Yeah. Okay. So you're primarily a short story writer. Would you call yourself that?
No, I mean, I would say that I would call myself primarily a novelist. Actually, this is the first time anyone's suggested that I'm primarily a short story writer, which is interesting to me. And I like it because I like short stories as well. But I was drawn to writing by novels, and most of the time I'm working or trying to get myself to work on novels. But here and there I'll write short stories, and I've been doing this for a while, so eventually they add up.
And you did say you feared permanence.
I feel like exactly.
I feel like a novel is a commitment when you get into it.
That is true. Yeah. I've never made that connection before, but I like making the leap into novels, partially because they can change a lot. Unlike tattoos. So you get a tattoo and that's your tattoo.
Yeah.
But you start writing a novel, and this novel, I worked on off and on for about 10 years.
That's great.
And it changed a lot. Initially I just had the idea like, the Epiphany machine. Basically the title came to me first, which by the way is not how I would recommend anyone write a book. It's a terrible, terrible way. Because I was like, okay, this is great. I have this title, and now I have to have characters and a story. And I had many false starts over many years. Actually, some of those false starts appear in the book in the form of the testimonials that Venter takes.
Those are the best.
I mean, I like them a lot. Yeah. There's sort of like little short stories that appear, and so in some ways it's true that the book is kind of a hybrid of a novel and a short story collection, and part of that is because of my own my own lack of commitment. You immediately saw right through to the heart.
I saw through it. That's your epiphany tattoo.
Yeah. There you go.
A machine.
Short story writer. This is terrific. Yeah.
Well, and I was just gonna say, I see the short story aspect, and I was explaining, just for people who aren't familiar with the book, it's a non-linear narrative in many ways, even though the main story is quite linear, but you have these out of sync testimonials, these interviews, and then segments from this other book that is as beautiful. And that style is very different from the rest of the book as well, because those are incredibly literary, and the repetition you use in some of this and some of those other sections, they're almost like a different author wrote them. And I've never read something that has so many different voices coming together in a way that works. It's harmonious, but it gives you this experience that you just don't get with other books, even in other books that where you might read asynchronous timelines or multiple points of view. You're reading this thing that feels like it's 5 different books all at once. And so you never have a chance to even get bored in a half second, because the minute you're in one thing, you're pulled into the next point, and you're getting someone else's point of view about something that gives a completely different spin on the thing you just heard. And I've never experienced anything like that. And I know that I'm sure a lot of people are going, well, this doesn't sound anything like science fiction. And if I didn't know it was science fiction based on where I found it in the library, I wouldn't have guessed it was science fiction, because there's nothing to me about it that's science fiction other than the fact that how this machine works defies any explanation.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, that's exactly how I hope the people would read it, and that they would respond to the way that I tried to braid the stories. I hear from a lot of people who say, like, "Oh, I like this one aspect of it, but why'd you do, the other aspects?" And it's never
we all
the same
hear
aspect.
that.
Exactly.
We just do this after a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Take my headphones out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, that's one thing that's really fun to me as a writer. It's to try on kind of different voices. People say, like, find your voice. Well, I don't want to find just one voice and just like maybe this goes back to being afraid of permanence. I don't want to just write in the same voice all the time for many years. There's some writers who I'll like one book that they wrote, and then I'll read that one, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of like the first one, and then I'll read a third one, and I'm like, okay, I kind of get this now, and then I don't read them again.
You call those people one-trick ponies?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? If it's a good pony and people want that pony, they know what they're getting, and that's fine. But I think most of us would feel constrained always to do that.
And there are some writers who find a pony that's really worth to continue with the metaphor. Maybe beat this dead pony into the ground to like ride it for a very long time. Yeah. And to really great effect. I mean, some of my favorite writers like Philip Roth and Alice Munro, they're not necessarily going to sound much different from book to book, but they're gonna really go deeply into that voice.
And they give a different spin on it, so it's not literally the same story.
That's certainly true. Like, and they continue to engage with their material from different angles, and in different ways, and that's great. That is, there are days when I kind of wish that I were that kind of writer, that I just like knew what I wanted to do all the time and would just do that.
Would that be easier? Because then you'd be at least directed somewhere.
I think it seems easier to me because I'm not that kind of writer. I think one common experience for writers is to think, okay, if only I were different, everything would be fine. But I'm not that kind of writer. I like to experiment with different voices and different approaches, and that's just who I am.
So we appreciate that. So here's my anecdote from today. I got my BookBub email of like, here's the books that are on sale, and I saw an author that I really like, and I went, oh, I should buy this. I read the description, and I'm like, I'll buy this. So I went on Amazon Kindle, and it was said, you've already purchased this book.
Have you already read it?
And then I was like, oh, I probably haven't read it. So I scroll through my Kindle, determined, I've read it. And I'm like, oh gosh, yeah. And then I looked at all the covers and I'm like, they are all the same and have the same kind of
Right.
title.
Yeah, right.
I love the author, but it was just one of those moments where I thought, oh, this is what happens when I don't know if I've read all of their work or if I've just read one book.
Right.
Twice or three times.
I've actually checked out books from the library and started reading them going, this feels really familiar.
I've done it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've read
I've
it.
got to like chapter
In the
3
library,
going,
I just go, all right, I already have it. If I didn't have something else to do, then I would read it again. I don't have time for that now, but back in the day, I'd be like, well, it didn't stick the first time. Let's try it again.
Yeah.
Because your style and like your inspiration is kind of all, I don't want to say all over the place, but it's varied. Does your publicist and your publisher and your agent, do they just say to you, you're very hard to market? Because we've heard that from other authors. Like we heard that from Matt Ruff of Lovecraft Country, that his publicist is like, stop it. Every book is different. So you laughed. So I feel like you have heard it.
No. I wouldn't say that I've heard it in those words, but it's been the subtext of a few conversations that I've had. Fortunately, I'm very blessed with my agent, who is actually a terrific friend as well as just a terrific reader. And she really gets what I'm doing. She gets sort of the deeper stuff behind what I'm doing. I'm working on my third book now. I don't have a contract for it. Yeah. This one is different. I guess I might as well just tell you a little bit about what it's about. So
give us the exclusive.
It's about a professor of early modern revenge tragedy, so Shakespeare and his contemporaries. And
I'm sorry, I took a class very much like that in college because I went to school for theater. That's why I went.
I may actually want to talk to you about that because that's very interesting. But his wife and child are murdered in a campus shooting, and so he gets the idea to start writing op-eds that are apparently in favor of gun violence, saying stuff like, I wish I had a gun to defend my wife and child, with the aim of getting invited to the convention of a certain organization that goes unnamed in the book, and that I won't mention here, but I think you can probably, most of you can probably guess.
Thank you.
Yeah. So he plans to get invited to the national convention of that organization and assassinate the leadership.
Oh my goodness. I love that.
And you don't have a contract for that yet?
You don't have a contract?
I don't have a contract for that yet. No.
Very Machiavellian meets Iago from Othello. Love that.
Well, and I come at it from a political science background because Jen's our theater nerd, but I was an attorney before because that wasn't smart either. But my background.
And are you saying my theater degree wasn't smart?
It was way more useful. No, but I took certain classes just because I loved the professor, and one of my professors took a whole class that was on basically the politics of revenge. So when you went there, I'm like, so we're back into the Icelandic blood feuds. Go on, I'm listening. If you put that in, I will happily help if I remember any of that because college was a long time ago.
I'm take you up on that. Yeah.
College was a long time ago, and it's been a long pandemic for us.
It's been a very long pandemic.
12 years ago, so it's still going.
Yeah, right.
Allison, Trisha, do you have any questions specifically for David before I just blab on about theater?
I actually do. I love that you said you had the title before the story idea. I've done that where I thought of a title. It's like, wow, that's kind of cool. Let's go with that. And I know everyone's about inspiration, and that's, do you find you come up with the story ideas through inspiration, or do you actually sit down and think about it? How do you come up with these ideas that are just incredibly unique and intriguing and amazing?
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I would say the answer to that is that I just have ideas as I'm reading. Mostly it's when I'm reading or just walking around, and then there are a lot of ideas, but ideas are kind of a dime a dozen.
Yes.
It's only about what you feel like you can bring alive to the page. And so eventually, if something really gets into me, I'll sit down and start to work on it. And then it's only when you start to work on it that more ideas come, or sometimes ideas don't come. And that happens to me too. Sometimes I'll have an idea. I'm like, yes, this is it. And I'll sit down and I'll work on it. In fact, actually, about 5 years ago, I had an idea for a pandemic novel I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to write this novel. And then I just wasn't into the characters in the world that I created. So I set it aside. And now that we're in a pandemic, I'm like, in the alternate timeline where I had a pandemic novel, I'd be rich and famous right now. But it just wasn't meant to be. Sadly,
and we've interviewed 2 authors who had pre-pandemic novels that came out shortly before the pandemic, and we're looking at them suspiciously, like they're behind it almost.
Because it's too specific. Too specific.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
But that also shows, for those writers, that was like the novel, right? But for me, it wasn't. So you have to have not only the idea, but it has to be the right idea for you at the right time.
Right, the right fit.
Yeah, exactly. And there were times when I was writing the Epiphany Machine where I thought this isn't the right idea for me. There were many times when I thought, okay, this was a great title, and I have nothing more than the title.
That's when you get a tattoo that just says the Epiphany Machine. Done.
Yeah.
It's art.
Should have done it. Yeah. And it's from this vantage point, I can look back and say, like, yes, this was the novel that I was meant to write all along, because I look back on this novel and I'm like, wow, there's a lot. I feel like there's a lot of really good stuff in this novel. However, when I was writing it, that's not what it looked like. It looked like a process where I would get an idea and then I would second guess myself and so forth. There were entire years when I thought, like, am I even a writer? Is this going anywhere?
Yeah.
Well, you're speaking my song right there, as far as the novel that takes years and that's changing as you go, and you're looking at it, and as you're in it, it's so hard to see what it is, and it's not until you look back and you go, oh, hey, there were themes there.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You didn't recognize that, because sometimes the themes, like the idea of I'm early in a working project right now, and I really don't even know where it's going, and I have to remind myself, when I started the book that I have on sub right now, I didn't know where that was going either, and to give myself, and I don't give myself any time anymore. Everything's immediate. So it's so good to be reminded that, okay, you don't always need to know where it is. And no, I don't have a title for that, but I didn't have a title for the book on sub till, well, I had to have a title before I put it in a query letter, because they expect that for some reason.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Could you name it later for me? That they won't go with that. They don't
name it later for me would be a title.
Yeah, name it later for me.
Yeah, exactly. Name it later.
That kind of sounds like the name of like a sleazy bar and like a crime noir.
See that? Yeah, there you go. Name it later.
Name it later.
Name it later.
Name it later. Oh, hot. Somebody write that down.
Well, I wanted to ask about some of the characters involved, because I've read enough books to know that it's very uncommon when I find a character like your protagonist, where there's something that's just so vulnerable and real about him. And then I was reading, some people are like, I didn't like this person. And I just wondered if they were reading the same book I was, because there was just something so heartbreaking about your protagonist. And I don't know how much of that, like, one of the things that hit me is because of the timeline. I'm only a couple years older than the protagonist. So we're starting with a protagonist who he's in high school when this starts and goes on. And those were my years in high school.
Yeah, they were my years in high school too.
Things he went through. Okay, so I figured we were roughly the same.
Yeah,
age.
We're all 90s high school kids.
90s high school kids. Yeah, and reading through and some of the events that they lived through. And I don't want to spoil too much, but I'm just going, I know where I was with this, and then watching things spin out of control. I just wanted to know how much of that was based on your own experiences, as far as your own feelings of who you were in high school and where you thought you were going. How much of that was you, and how much of that was like, well, I just made up this character to put him through that, but he's nothing like me.
Well, I found this machine that tattooed epiphanies on people's arms.
I refused to get one. I forced it on my best friend.
No.
I got mine. It's right here.
There you go. Exactly. See?
That's exactly where they go.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I'm like, yes. And mine's a quote from Shirley Jackson, so that does make sense.
That's actually pretty good. Yeah.
Jen's been in an upstairs apartment getting some tattoos. Go on.
So when I had all these stories together, and I needed to pull something through, and I felt like I needed a character who would get kind of a secondhand education from all these tattoos. And I thought, okay, well, why don't I imagine myself in that position? And so, I certainly don't want to overstate the similarities of Venter to me. Venter's mother has abandoned him, and my mother certainly did not abandon me. My mother does a lot of and to this day does a lot of childcare for me. So I certainly
the opposite.
Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite.
We don't want mom listening to this right now. Did you base
Oh wow!
Yeah. I mean, I actually at my launch, my mom started telling people that she had abandoned me just for
so you could sell tens of books.
Exactly.
Tragic author backstory.
But that also shows that I mean, I hope that the dark humor in this book comes through, and that's something that I it really inherited from her. She has a very nicely dark sense of humor, and that's sort of helped me through the dark years of
writing the book,
of writing the book, and being an author, and also the last few years have been politically dark in all kinds of ways. Really, the last many years have been politically dark in lots of ways.
Well, and so you bring up politics, because I would say that was something I did not expect when reading your book, because I read a lot of books in sci-fi, and sometimes they kind of hint at politics. Yours does not pull any punches, and you don't broadcast that at the beginning. It kind of sneaks up on you, and then when it does, it's one of these things where you go, "Oh crap! I didn't realize this was happening." Did you get any pushback from anybody, either in that editorial process or reviews, or anybody who had any issues with
I wouldn't say that I got pushback. I mean, I'm sure if I went through my Goodreads, I could find a lot of people who were happy.
Oh, don't read
that.
No,
Goodreads. Every time I look at my own Goodreads, I'm like, why did I do that?
I go to Goodreads sometimes because I can't help myself, and sometimes they're mean, but also I feel like my book's out there, so I feel like that's true. That's entirely fair game. I think a lot of people say this, like, don't tag our authors in negative reviews, and I would agree with that. There's really no reason for you to let an author know if you've written a negative review about their work.
But
I think that writing negative reviews is totally fair game. Even if it hurts my feelings, I put a book out there, that's the way it is. But in terms of how the politics came to be, I would say that first of all, just kind of because I wrote the book and I'm interested in this stuff. My first novel, which came out through a small press, actually before I even had an agent, is even more political than this one. It's just kind of what I'm interested in. I've always been interested in the way that 9/11 caused this big rift when I was in college at the time, to date myself, as where it sounds like we're all around the same age.
When that happened,
and then what to my mind was the massive overreaction to 9/11 that caused the curtailing of civil liberties, and that caused all kinds of terrible things that have continued to ramify into today. That's sort of what I think about when I think about the course of my life as it relates to the wider world. Now, in my own life, because I didn't serve in Afghanistan or Iraq, and like many Americans, I'm fairly sheltered from the stuff that America does. But I decided to put in my book a character who is the best friend of my protagonist, a character who gets very negatively affected by what happens, and I just sort of thought through what might happen to somebody like me in this situation. I like to think that I would act better than Venter does, but that's not. First of all, you don't really know that, and that's also not literature. It's not interesting to me, at least, when people act well. I'm more interested in people making the wrong decisions, because most of us
yes, but when people make the wrong decisions, then there are other people who can react to that. If the person just acted right in the first place, then you don't have a story. You need to have an interaction of what are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you sleeping at night?
Yeah. I mean, people will complain about stories not having. This is thankfully not a complaint that I get a lot, because I tend to be kind of plot centered. But people will often complain that in literary fiction nothing happens, and then they complain about other stories that the characters are unlikable.
Have you been reading my Goodreads reviews?
I mean, I definitely get that all the time.
I was like, there was no plot and nothing happened. I'm like, a lot of things happened, and the characters, I didn't even like them. I'm like, my favorites are the ones that complain, but then they say, well, the end was good, and I'm like, yes, you got to the end.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, that, to a certain extent, that's all that matters.
Yes.
If you get to the end, that's really what matters. But having characters who are not likable is a much better way of getting things to happen than characters who are likable, and characters who make the right decision. Great for them.
But okay, but I'm going to argue that making the right decision isn't the question of whether or not a character is likable, because I think
that's entirely fair.
The things later. Mm-hmm. You already had established a character that was so nuanced and real that you completely, like, I knew what he was going to do because you'd established him. So he wasn't acting out of character, and he wasn't an unlikable character up until that point at all. So when I was reading those, I was thinking, okay, did these people just skip the chunks that established who this was and who what his background was and how he'd lived his life up until that point? And yes, he made some decisions along the way that you go, but that made him real. That made him this fleshed out character that I needed to see to the end and see how things were going to turn out for him. Whereas there are other characters I've read that are unlikable that you're just like, and now I've stopped caring.
Sure.
That's a very different thing.
Thank you. That's very good to hear. And I would agree with that. There are some writers who will take the idea of not liking likable characters too far, and just say, like, okay, well, I'm just going to make my character behave like an asshole, and then that's going to be literature.
But there always has to be I love flawed characters, as long as I get that little instinct of why I know why they're being an asshole. If I know, and especially if they are self-aware enough, like in their inner monologue, to say, I know I'm an asshole right now, but I can't help it. This is just who I am. But then you understand who they are, and then you feel bad for them. I'm a sucker for that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. A perfect example of that from a recent movie would be Uncut Gems, where that character makes terrible decision after terrible decision, but you understand why he's doing it, even though you really want him to make.
It's like, just do something better than that, and then
but we know why he's doing it, and for me at least, I'm on the edge of my seat while I'm watching that movie.
So as a writer, I'm more character driven than plot driven. So again, I get those criticisms like this had no plot or whatever, no plot.
Right.
So I love a good flawed character, and I'll watch a movie, a TV show, read a book that has a character I can understand.
Absolutely.
I don't even need to like them. I just need to understand them.
Yeah.
And I will root for them or root against them. It's both of them are enjoyable to me.
Absolutely. I'm absolutely with you. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I wanted to change the subject about literary stuff. So finish what you're saying on characters, because
I was just going to say that I think the character and plot really go together. And sometimes you think about characters and how they affect what's going on. Sometimes you think about what situation you want your characters to be in, and how they're going to relate. But if you're thinking seriously about story, then it's all going to be related. So Jennifer, I haven't read any of your books, but I bet if I read them, I'm going to see that that there's a lot of
that they're not likable.
No, that are I read just that there's a lot of stuff going on in the books.
There is stuff going on, contrary to some
exactly.
people's popular beliefs.
Something that I found from just like hanging out with writers is that I can tell if I'm going to like their books from talking, which is maybe not something I should even say, but I can tell I would like your guys' books just from talking to you. So
I think as authors, what the best thing we can do for ourselves is actually just be who we are.
Absolutely.
And that's why podcasts and interviews and things like that are so crucial, especially I don't want to say like these little podcasts. Like we're not a huge podcast. We do very well on our network, but we're not NPR.
Sure.
But we're not. I'm sorry, guys. We're not. I didn't tell them.
I'm not Jonathan Franzen. Just
But people will hear this and they'll like you.
Well, thank you.
Or they'll know you. Even if they don't like you, they should like you. You've been likable. And then everybody should be looking at your website that's scrolling underneath us and say, I want to find out more about David Burr Gerrard, because authors, as who they are, sell books just as much as books lead people back to the author.
Right. I think that's absolutely true. And I think that a lot of writers who don't like publicity feel that they have to be somebody else and that they have to project the image of the author who sits down at his computer at 5 a.m. and writes until noon and revises only commas because everything's in their head from the beginning, and that's not who you are. But some people are like that, and if that's who you are,
some people are. We haven't met anybody, and we've been doing the show for a while. We have not met one person who's like, you know what I write is perfect, right out of my brain and into my fingers.
I mean, I haven't met anybody like that either. I'm just sort of trying to imagine that.
But
maybe
that's the image.
Exactly.
That's the image of you.
Exactly.
If you're a writer, air quotes, you write every day, and you write several thousand words a day, and you're always working on that book, book that's going to be the book that changes the world.
Right.
But sometimes writing to me is just staring out the window for 4 hours.
Absolutely.
And just getting there. And then maybe writing a sentence.
Right.
Some days I write 4,000 words. Yeah. Those are not usually great words, but they are words.
No. I mean,
they are words.
I mean, during the pandemic, a lot of my writing has looked like me eating a lot of Annie's cheddar bunnies and not getting any work done. And then sometimes I'll sit down and I'll write a couple thousand words, or sometimes I'll write 200 words and that'll be go 20 words. You just kind of do what you can.
Yeah. Or scroll back, fix a couple commas.
Yeah.
Then go, work's done for today.
Yeah, exactly.
I have conquered the comma. Yeah.
I can't conquer the comma.
Usually when I find myself spending like a week on a comma, I then just like cut the chapter out.
The whole chapter.
Yeah. Because if I think like,
comma.
There's something wrong here. Maybe if I just like move a couple commas around, that'll fix it. I'm like, no, it won't. It wasn't
like, the comma.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like if you're singing and you can't hit a note, it's not that note that you can't hit. It's what's happened before that.
Yeah.
So I've done that too, where I spend like hours on a paragraph that I think I'm like, this is really important.
Yeah.
And then I go, it just doesn't make sense. Copy and paste it, throw it in a different random file of This is why our show's called Vox Vomitus or Word Vomit. Like, we embrace the mistakes and hope to learn from them.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to ask, I know we're running low on time, but
I know we're running low on time.
Are we okay? Do I have time?
You have time.
Okay. No, I just wanted to ask how you went from going with a small press to like the bigger book. How was that for you? And was that a deliberate choice? Was that accidental? Was that something where just the fate smiled on you? Because you said it was before you had your agent. And
it was definitely a fate smiling on me kind of situation. My first novel, I was sending out to agents and having no success. And then a friend of mine got published by a small press out in LA and said, "Do you mind if I send them your book?" And I said, "Sure." Not really expecting anything to happen. And then I heard back from them, and they wanted to publish it. Now I got $0 for that deal. But I also didn't, it didn't cost me anything, so I didn't have to like self-publish. So that they covered all the printing costs, and then I had a book, which is pretty good.
That's pretty good. That's not bad.
And that allowed me to start teaching and so forth, teaching creative writing. I'd been teaching other things before that, but now I can start teaching creative writing. And then I got an email from my now agent, Monica Wood, saying, "Oh, hey, I read your book and I loved it, and I'd like to represent you."
So how did were you querying me when that happened?
No. At that point, I wasn't querying at all. So I happened to have a friend who was an editor who had lunch with her and said, "Oh, you got to read this book," and she did, and she loved it. And so that's what happened. And she's since become one of my closest friends, and she's a terrific agent. And I hope never to be out there again. I hope never to be weird.
I feel like once you find good people that like rep you, whether it's a publicist, an agent, or an editor, you just like cling on to them like Rose did on that Titanic door.
Right, sure.
There you go. Like, I'm not letting go. There's no room for Jack. There's just room for me.
I won't ask who Jack is in that analogy, but I think you're right.
I think the rest of the world is.
Yeah, really, like any other agent, any other editor.
That's the Jack. It's like you are my person. You're my person.
Yeah, exactly.
And it sounds like you have the relationship then that it wasn't for just this particular manuscript, because now you have this relationship and. You don't have a contract for the next book, but this person's going to be out there representing you for that book and making sure that book gets found so that we can read it, because I want to read it.
Thank you very much.
I love
it. I'm looking forward to it. So is that first book then, is that not available now, or can we still?
No, it's available. Yeah.
I'm like looking at a psycho. I'm like, no, it's available.
You said you got. So I'm like going, is this book, did it get hidden somewhere, or we can still go find it?
No, you can still go find it.
Okay.
And
you can go dig it up.
Find the ebook or there's still print copies, so you can order it. Actually, my publisher, the small publisher, Rare Bird, does a really terrific job. They make really beautiful books. So actually, I recommend the book as a physical object, and I feel like I can do that because I didn't have anything to do with creating the book as a physical object. But they did a really terrific job with it, and there are still copies flying around there. So
I love the
calling dibs on one.
Okay,
right.
Awesome.
Good book. You just like plugged your book inadvertently, Allison.
Yeah,
loved it.
When you have a word, like one word title, you can do that really easily.
I know I can't work my titles into a book.
No.
Anyways, I am very sorry to say we are out of time.
Well, this was a pleasure. Thank you.
You were wonderful.
Thank
you so much for being here. Thank you to my Vox Vomitus Vixens. As always, I have a few quick announcements. Saturday, we have a special Saturday morning edition of Vox Vomitus with Elizabeth Gifford. She is in, I want to say England or Scotland. I can't remember off the top of my head, which is why we are going live Saturday morning.
That's cool.
Which is awesome. Next Wednesday, we are going to be back with our normal time with Greta Kelly, which is great. And then Thursday, this is a shameless plug for me. I am co-hosting or one of the guest hosts of the Writer's Showcase. We are back from hiatus. I will be interviewing Paul Tremblay at 7 p.m. next Thursday. I will fangirl. I might cry. I've done it before in front of him. I don't know why he's coming back again. But,
I'm kind of surprised he agreed to it, honestly.
I feel like I'm better this time. I was like, I'm cool now. He's like, all right, sure. So that is what's happening next week. Interview-wise, follow our Facebook page. You'll get all of the updates. Thank you to Roman Sorotin, our video director and our showrunner. Thank you to Pam Stack, the executive producer at the Global Authors on the Air Network. This has been a copywritten podcast by Global Authors on the Air, and we will see you all next Saturday, or this Saturday, at noon Eastern Standard Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. There, I got the time right. Thank you.